Okay, so this video is to show you how to frame in drawings using black paper. So to do this, I'm going to be showing you how to frame in two drawings. These were done by a student and we're going to frame them side by side. So materials that you need for this, you always want to make sure that you have a ruler or something as a straight edge. You want to have a glue mat and an X-Acto, and then you want to also have a pencil to draw with. In addition, you want to have some black paper to create your mat. So I have some smaller black paper that is typically in the cabinet over there. I'm going to pan over to show. It's in the third shelf from the bottom. It just says black paper, if you can see that. And then there are these really big sheets, which we're going to need for this project. And these are in the area next to the spray booth. So in between the spray booth and the wall, there is a box with this large paper in it. So in order to do this, you need to get yourself a piece of scratch paper or a page from your sketchbook, and you need to sort of draw out a map. So this is how we're going to frame these. We're going to put his pencil drawing in the left and his pen drawing in the right. So I need to do a little bit of measuring. So first I'm going to start by measuring the width of these pieces of paper, and I'm going to measure it in inches to make it easier. So it's roughly 8 inches. We don't have to get you can get as exact as you want. It's probably 7 and, 7/8, but I'm gonna just round that to 8. And then the second one should be the same size, but we'll measure it just to make sure. This one is also 8 inches. Okay, and then we also need to measure the height of these pieces of paper. And these are 12 inches and 12 inches. Okay. All right, so now if you can kind of zoom in on this map, hopefully this makes sense. So this is how we're gonna map this out. So the first thing we need to do is figure out the width of our paper. So both of his drawings are going to be 8 inches. He wants to have a 1-inch gap in between, and then he wants to do 1.5 inches on either side. I would suggest doing either a 1 or 2 inch gap in the middle, and then anywhere from a 1, 1.5, or 2 inch border around the outside. That is your personal choice. So if we add all of these things up, we're gonna take this, plus that, and that will get us 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So my paper needs to be 20 inches long, and I'm a visual person, so I always have to draw this out. I can never just do this in my head. So then we have to figure out the height, and the height for his, so this was 12 inches, and then he wants that 1.5 inch border on the bottom and on the top. So for this one, we only need to add up those 3 numbers, and that will get us 15, right? 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so now I'm gonna go onto my black paper, and first I'm gonna cut out the border. I have to grab a pencil really quick. Okay. So I'm going to take my ruler here. You could do this over on the paper cutter if you're comfortable using the paper cutter. But if you are not, then, and I'll just show you how to hand measure it. So I'm going to put my ruler, make sure if you can look on some of these rulers, sometimes the edge of the ruler is not 0. So if I look at this one, the 0 is in a little bit. So if I were to put the edge of my ruler up on the paper, it would mess up my results. And I want to go 20 inches for the width. So I'm going to mark 20 inches right here. And on this side of the paper, I'm going to mark this all up. And then the other side of the paper will be the side that will show. So I'm going to mark 20 inches right here. I just went up a little bit. And now I'm going to draw this line in. As I'm drawing this line in, and I should have said this earlier, but you want to make sure that your table space is fairly clean so that we're not getting a bunch of junk on the back of this paper. Okay, so now my width is correct, and my height, if you remember from my map, is 15 inches. So I'm going to measure that out, and I was pretty close. So along that line I drew, I'm going to measure 15. And then over on this side of the paper, I'm also going to measure 15. You don't ever want to just measure on one side and then try to draw a straight line, because even if you are amazing, it will probably not be a straight line. It'll probably be at a little bit of an angle. So we want to draw this in. So now I have my height and my width. I'm going to wait to cut that out. And now I'm going to draw my windows in. And here's where you have to just guesstimate a little bit. So he wants a 1.5 inch border on all 4 sides. So I'm going to start by drawing that in. But if we cut this window, so this paper, if you remember, it was 8 by 12. If we cut the window to exactly 8 by 12, this image is going to fall through the window. So we need to cut our window slightly smaller. So this 1.5 inch border, I'm actually gonna do about 1 and, we'll go 1 and 1 and 5/8, which is a little bit larger than 1.5. And again, I'm gonna make both of those marks. So I'm gonna make one on the top and one on the bottom, and I'm gonna go through and draw my lines in. And you can mark this whole paper up because this is gonna be the back of your paper. And then I'll do the same thing on the right side. So again, 1 and 5/8. In his case, in your case, your measurements might be a little different, but I want that measurement to be slightly bigger than that 1.5 inches. And hopefully this turns out. If you accidentally cut your mat a little too small, there are some things that you can do to fix that too. So now I have my borders on the left and the right, and I need to make my borders on the top and the bottom. So we'll start with the bottom, 1 inch and 5/8, and 1 inch and 5/8, and then I'll draw this in. Okay, and then we'll do the top. And you can do this same technique if you are matting more than 2 things together. The only thing that really limits you is the size of the paper that we have to use. This is kind of the biggest black paper that we have to work with. All right, so now I have my border around all 4 sides, and now I just have to cut out the middle. So I'm gonna start from the bottom. I work my way from the left to the right, and I know that this needs to be 8 inches, but I'm gonna make this measurement a little bit smaller than 8 inches, okay? Again, if I go exactly at 8 inches, my paper is gonna fall through. So to make up for that, I'm gonna go about 7 3/4. So I'm gonna go a full 1/4 inch smaller. And then again, I'll go up to the top. I'm gonna make that same measurement, 7 3/4. And then I'll draw this line in, and I'm gonna double check it before I cut it. So if I hold my image up here, my image, if you can see that, hangs over my line a little bit on either side, which is exactly what we want. We wouldn't want this line to be perfectly up against your image. And if that's not making sense to you right now, hopefully it will when I cut these windows out. Okay, then I want to make the same measurement for the right side, so I'm going at 7 3/4. 7 3/4, and I'm going to draw this in, making sure I'm always making marks on the top and the bottom before I draw my line in. And if I did my math correctly, this should be 1 inch, or pretty close to 1 inch. And it's a little more than 1 inch, which is just fine, okay? So now I have this all mapped out. I want to check my height also. So my height, and if I look at my height, if you can see that, see how that overhang isn't it's really tiny there and there. So to fix that, because that's a little too small of an overhang for me, I'm just gonna move this line down a little bit, and I'm gonna do that on both sides. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it. You could measure it, but since I'm only shifting it down about 1/8 of an inch on both sides, I should be able to eyeball it just fine. And that might mean that your border is not going to be exactly the same on all 4 sides, but as long as it's roughly the same and it appears the same, you should be fine. Okay, now that I have this mapped out, sometimes if you have to make marks like this, it's helpful to sort of draw yourself like little arrows so you can figure out which ones you're cutting from. I like to do that so I do it correctly. And then always make sure you have a blue mat underneath you when you are cutting. And I like to use a ruler as well. And I like to hold my ruler up to the end piece that I'm cutting and cut my line nice and straight using the ruler as a guide. Make sure when you're using the X-Actos that you're holding the ruler in the middle so that your ruler doesn't move and that you are cutting towards yourself when you're using the X-Acto. Okay, and I want to just make sure that I'm cutting on the correct lines. I'm going to cut these 4 out. You have to be extra careful on the corners because we want to make sure that those corners come out nice and clean, and that we also want to make sure that we don't overcut them. Like I wouldn't want to start my cut here. You have to start at the right spot. Okay. One more cut to make on this window. I can kind of feel that my board is in the right spot. If you get an X-Acto and the blade is really dull or there is a blade missing, I have refills at my desk. You can just come up and ask me and I will get you a refill. Okay, and then if I cut everything out correctly, I might have to go and deepen some of those cuts. Then I guess I didn't cut deep enough. There we go. I don't want to rip this because if I rip it, it's going to give me like frayed edges. Okay. I'm going to go through and cut out the second window. So if you are watching this video and you're in the middle of working, you probably don't need to watch this part. You can skip ahead a little bit, but I don't want to go back and edit this video, so it's all going to be in one chunk. And then the final 2 steps are cutting out the outside edge. There, that one came out a lot easier. I cut that one. So I'm going to cut out the outside edge. Again, you could use a scissors or a paper cutter. I'm just going to use this X-Acto since this is what I have with me. But I'll have to move my glue mat about halfway through. And this paper is just construction paper, so it's not super thick. You could do this. This is the same process you would do with like a mat board or a tag board if we were professionally matting a photo. This is just kind of for looks, so we're just using construction paper. But it finishes it off and creates a really nice border. Almost done. Okay, so now that I have this all cut, I am going to flip this over, and this is the window that I wanted. So one of his drawings is going to go inside of here, and the other is going to go inside of here. If you have any little frayed edges like this, you might want to get rid of those just with an X-Acto or scissors, and if your paper got dirty, you want to try to clean that off. So I'm just going to use tape from my desk. You can use this or you can use masking tape, and I'm going to flip it around again. And he wanted his pencil drawing on the right, so when I tape it here, it's actually going to go on, yes, Yes, I wanna make sure I do this right. Yep. So I'm gonna put this on the right here. And now I wanna center this on my mat. So now this is the part where you're gonna notice if you cut your window exactly the size of your paper, your drawing is not gonna have anything to hold on to. You're not gonna have any edge to tape onto. And if that is the case, what you can do is glue your whole drawing or painting, whatever it is, print, you can glue that all onto a piece of white paper and sort of cut that out and give yourself an extra surface area to work with. I'm gonna go through and just use 2 pieces of tape. You don't need to like lather up the tape and do like a, you know, a whole border. Just a couple pieces on either side. If you're afraid it's not gonna look how you want it to look, you can just put 1 piece of tape on the top and flip it and look at it, and that's pretty good, okay? I'm gonna do that same thing with the other one because in this case, we're matting 2. So we wanna line it up, center it. Again, if I'm not quite sure how this is gonna look, I might just wanna put 1 piece of tape. I might wanna flip it and just make sure that everything looks good on the front, and it does. So then I'll go through and finish this off, okay? And this is really all you need to know. You can adjust this, do this process. You could mat, if you're in Intro to Art and we're doing the printmaking project, you could mat 4 pieces. You can mat as many as you need to. You just have to take the time to kind of plan and map it out first. So now that I have all these, that's on the back, then we flip it and we get a really nice looking professional